In December 1944, Hitler launched a final, desperate gamble on the Western Front. The Ardennes Offensive, codenamed Watch on the Rhine. A massive tide of German armor tore through thin American lines. Heavy fog grounded Allied air support, and the forest became a chaotic maze of scattered units and severed communication lines. Private Romano's unit was ordered to hold a critical forest intersection, a vital artery for the fuel supplies of the advancing panzer divisions. However, the German vanguard arrived far sooner than expected, and heavy artillery raked the American forward positions. Amidst the chaos of a retreat order, Romano found himself cut off from the main force. He had only his M1903A4 Springfield sniper rifle equipped with an M73B1 scope for ammo belts and a bundle of climbing rope he always carried. Facing a swarm of German scouts, staying in a ground-level foxhole was suicide. He looked up at a century-old oak swaying in the wind. Its trunk was thick, and its dense foliage offered both weight-bearing strength and a 360-degree field of fire. He made a decision that would have driven any instructor mad. He would climb, leave the earth behind, and turn himself into a rifle suspended in the sky. Using expert lasso techniques, he hung his supply pack between the branches and vanished like a cat into the thick needles and snow. As the first German sidecar motorcycle roared onto the road below, Romano was already lashed tightly to a horizontal branch 12 meters above the ground. He scraped the frost off his scope with a knife and steadied his breathing. On the first page of the sniper's manual, it was written in bold, "Never fire more than 3 times from the same position. Never establish a nest at a high point lacking an exit route." Romano glanced coldly at his rifle, muttered a Brooklyn slang phrase, and pulled the trigger for the first time. The bullet angled down from the sky, piercing the motorcyclist's neck. The vehicle instantly veered into the embankment. This was the first name on his kill list in the Ardennes. Over the next 72 hours, he would completely subvert the logic of World War II sniping. The Germans would discover that their most terrifying enemy came not from the depths of the woods, but from the gray sky they never thought to look toward. As the battle intensified, Romano faced challenges beyond the enemy. Winter temperatures in the Ardennes plummeted below -15 degrees Celsius. At an altitude of 12 meters, wind speeds were higher than at ground level, stripping away body heat at a desperate rate. His boots filled with ice water, which then froze solid. To keep his trigger finger from becoming useless with frostbite, he took turns tucking his hands into his armpits, using his core temperature to force blood circulation. He carried only a few stone-hard K rations and a canteen of water that had frozen into a solid block of ice. Whenever he grew parched, he grabbed handfuls of snow from branches. This extreme physical torment did not break his will. Instead, it pushed him into an eerie, almost mechanical state of focus. During the first 24 hours, the Germans were arrogant. They dismissed the fire as occasional potshots from American stragglers. Romano exploited this mindset, establishing a precise priority sequence. First, radio operators to sever the units linked to the rear. Second, officers and NCOs to create a command vacuum. Third, the drive wheels of fuel trucks. He waited patiently until targets entered the optimal high-angle firing zone. In the crown of that oak, he used the natural fork of the trunk as a gun rest. The recoil of the M1903A4 was perfectly channeled through his shoulder into the tree. With every shot, snow would gently shake loose from the canopy like a silent funeral. By the second day, the Germans realized the gravity of the situation. They had left 12 bodies on the road, including 2 forward observers responsible for coordinating artillery. A German infantry company was forced to a halt, the commander hysterically ordering machine guns to spray the surrounding woods. But Romano had learned. He didn't just hide behind the trunk. He used a thin cord to hang an extra jacket on a distant branch. While the Germans poured ammunition into that swaying dark shadow, he coldly leaned out from the opposite side of the main trunk and shot the German lieutenant in the head. This cat-and-mouse game played out in the frozen forest, each hour feeling like a year. The Germans began using mortars, attempting to carpet bomb the area. Shells exploded among the trees, shattering timber. The shrapnel and shockwaves caused the great oak to sway violently. Romano, like a madman, lashed himself even tighter to the trunk, shielding his rifle with his body through the tremors. He knew that as long as he didn't fall, this road was a dead end for the Germans. As the sun set on the second day, the Ardennes was shrouded in a suffocating blue-gray. The advance of the 5th Panzer Army began to slow due to the delay on the supply line. For the German rank and file, that snow-covered logging road had become an impassable gate to hell. They gave their unseen opponent a nickname, the Death in the Trees. In reality, Romano was at his physiological limit. His legs had lost all sensation from hours of straddling the branch, and severe frostbite was eating at his toes. Fearing that the smell of waste would give away his position, he barely ate, maintaining his last shred of clarity through sheer willpower. But his M1903A4 Springfield maintained its lethal mechanical precision. This rifle was the only purpose-built sniper weapon produced in large numbers by the U.S. in World War II. It lacked iron sights, featuring instead a 2.5x magnification M73B1 scope. While the magnification wasn't high, in the poor visibility of the Ardennes, it could catch the slightest movement better than the naked eye. Romano knew the rifle's temper. As a bolt action, every round cycled needed smooth force. Otherwise, the bolt could easily freeze in the extreme cold. He used a small bottle of lubricant to carefully oil the moving parts of the receiver, and between shots, he tucked the bolt assembly against his chest to warm it with his body heat. This almost religious care for his equipment ensured he never suffered a misfire at a critical moment. In contrast, the German soldiers carried Kar 98K rifles. Though equally accurate, they were at a tactical disadvantage against a high-angle shooter in the dense woods. In forest and mountain warfare, height is life. Being 12 meters up meant Romano's range was slightly extended by gravity. More importantly, he could look down into foxholes the Germans considered safe. When a German soldier huddled in a pit to light a cigarette, he didn't know the gap in the branches above him was centered in Romano's crosshairs. A flash of fire, a fallen cigarette, and a life ended instantly. Romano didn't even need a headshot. A bullet fired from above would pierce the shoulder and enter the chest cavity, causing devastating internal damage. Into the third 24-hour period, the battle entered its most brutal phase. A vanguard company of the 12th Volksgrenadier Division lost all patience. They stopped blind firing and brought up two 81mm mortars. Suspecting the American sniper was in this stand of tall oaks, they decided on a logging tactic, using concentrated fire to blow down every suspicious tree. Thump, thump. The metallic sound of mortar shells sliding into tubes echoed through the valley. Romano heard it clearly from the treetop. He didn't panic. Instead, he curled his body into a ball, pressing himself tight against the lee side of the trunk. The first round of shells exploded. White-hot shrapnel tore through the branches. He could feel the century-old oak trembling in agony beneath him. A massive horizontal branch was blown off, crashing to the ground with a roar. Romano's ears rang from the shockwave and blood leaked from his nose, but he did not let go of the climbing rope that anchored him. He was gambling, betting that the Germans had limited shells, and that they wouldn't dare maintain unaimed bombardment in the thick fog for long. The shelling lasted 15 minutes. When the smoke cleared, a German officer waved his pistol, ordering a platoon to charge. They believed nothing could have survived such fire. Just as the grenadiers in their white snow camouflage crossed the road, a spectral flash of fire erupted once again from the top of that charred, broken oak. Click. A shell casing tumbled into the snow caught between the branches, making no sound. The leading German NCO dropped instantly. Romano's eyes were cold, without a trace of emotion. He began cycling the bolt with frantic speed, emptying the 5-round magazine in 10 seconds. It was a one-sided slaughter. Since the Germans were on the open snow with no cover, they were perfect moving targets. Aim cycle, adjust for windage, fire again. His movements were as fluid as if he were hunting pigeons on a Brooklyn rooftop. Only this time, it was elite SS troops falling. Amidst the German chaos, Romano spotted a lethal target. About 200 yards back, a German was trying to set up an MG-42. If that weapon, the Hitler's buzzsaw, opened up, he would be shredded even at his height. Romano held his breath and took a position never taught in any sniper manual. He hooked his feet around the trunk and hung backward, using gravity to steady the rifle. In his scope, the crosshairs locked onto the back of the machine gunner's head. Bang! A cloud of blood erupted from the gunner's forehead as he slumped over the tripod. The assistant gunner tried to push the body aside to continue firing, but Romano's second bullet followed instantly, punching straight through the man's chest. Within 2 minutes, a company-level charge had been hammered back by a single private hanging from a tree. A dozen twisted bodies remained on the snow as the survivors retreated in terror. They began to believe the forest was cursed. By now, Romano was completely dehydrated. His tongue was so swollen it pressed against the roof of his mouth, and he began to hallucinate. He saw the deli near his home in Brooklyn and smelled his mother's pasta. But he bit down hard on his tongue. The sharp pain brought him back to reality. He counted his remaining ammo, 41 rounds left. He knew the Germans wouldn't quit. They were gathering their last elites for a decapitation strike. Romano had only his overheated Springfield and this scarred oak tree. That night, Romano made a decision that defied all military common sense. He didn't use the darkness to climb down and escape. Instead, he untied his ropes and climbed even higher, into thinner, more flexible branches. He knew that at dawn, the Germans would concentrate all fire on the spot where he had been. He would use that expectation to deliver one final surprise. The wind howled through the midnight forest like a choir of ghosts. Romano huddled in the treetop, watching the distant, flickering headlights of German armored vehicles. He knew that the coming dawn would either be the moment he reached a tally of 87 kills, or the moment this tree became his tombstone. He felt no fear, only a cold sense of professionalism. He checked his scope settings one last time, pressed the final rounds into the magazine, and closed his eyes for a brief, dangerous sleep. December 18, 1944, 5:30 a.m. The fog in the Ardennes was as thick as a leaden blanket, with visibility under 20 yards. Romano's muscles were as stiff as dead wood, but he was jolted awake by the faint metallic scrape of a belt buckle hitting a rifle stock. The Germans were serious now. They had sent a special 41-man search-and-kill team of experienced Waffen-SS soldiers. These weren't the Volksgrenadiers from before. They were armed with STG 44 assault rifles and white phosphorus grenades. Their goal: pull this thorn from the supply line once and for all. The Germans used standard bounding overwatch tactics, advancing in pairs in a fan formation. In the fog, the ground troops were nearly invisible. But Romano, at 15 meters high, was at the upper edge of the mist. Looking down, the fog was like semi-transparent frosted glass. The air current stirred by the moving Germans, and the occasional dark glint of a helmet stood out sharply against the white haze. It was absolute visual dominance. Romano didn't hurry. He waited for them to enter the death funnel he had already calculated, a natural bottleneck created by 3 massive pines. As the lead officer stepped over a fallen log, Romano pulled the trigger for the first time on the 4th day. The bullet came straight down, piercing the officer's shoulder and severing his spine. Battle erupted instantly. The Germans showed high tactical skill, forming a circle and spraying the canopy with blind fire. STG 44 rounds trimmed the branches like a hailstorm. Romano felt the branches beneath him shaking violently, with splinters flew into his eyes. But he maintained a masochistic calm, refusing to hide. He waited for the 2-second window when the Germans were changing magazines, then leaned out again. This time, he didn't settle for slow shots. He cycled the bolt with incredible speed, using the downward angle to his advantage, firing 15 rounds in a single minute. Each bullet seemed to have eyes, finding the Germans as they prepared to throw grenades. One soldier had just pulled the pin when a bullet hit his chest. The smoking grenade dropped among his comrades, causing a horrific explosion. A red and black cloud rose from the snow as screams tore through the morning silence. Finally, the Germans locked onto Romano's position. A sniper hidden in a snowdrift fired a tracer round, attempting to mark him. The bullet hissed past Romano's ear, the heat searing his skin. Romano knew height was his only advantage. If the enemy sniper calmed down, Romano was a sitting duck. He performed a desperate move. He unhooked all his safety lines and let his body slide down, catching himself by hanging upside down from a thinner branch by his legs. The moment he slid, the German sniper's second shot hit exactly where his head had been. Hanging upside down, enduring a massive headache from the blood rushing to his brain, Romano braced the rifle against his stomach and scanned through the scope. He saw it, 200 yards away. Under a pile of white snow, a faint wisp of muzzle smoke. "Goodbye, pal," Romano whispered. He timed the swaying of the branch, pulling the trigger at the apex. The recoil of the Springfield swung him through the air, but the bullet cut through the fog and drove straight into the German sniper's eye socket. The enemy's rifle fell uselessly into the snow. The last long-range threat was gone. The remaining 30 Germans broke. To them, this enemy was invincible, a ghost that moved through the canopy and could predict the path of bullets. With their officers dead, the survivors fled into the woods. Romano did not let them go. He climbed back to his high perch and calmly counted the retreating heads, every crack of his rifle marking the end of another invader. By the time his last bullet was spent, only 3 shell-shock survivors from the 41-man elite team made it back to the German lines. When the vanguard of the 99th Infantry Division retook the position on the afternoon of December 19th, they were stunned. On the road, German bodies were piled deep, most with lethal wounds to the shoulders or the top of the head. Captain Rand found a soldier with a face turned blue from the cold, lashed to the top of an oak tree that had been stripped of its bark by artillery. He was clutching a rifle and was in a deep coma. When the medics lowered Romano, his body was so stiff from maintaining one position for so long that he was stuck in the shape of a tree fork. Doctors had to carefully bend his limbs back. In the crevices of the branches below him, American soldiers counted 87 spent .30-06 shell casings. The post-war story was ironic. Initially, military police considered questioning Romano for violating sniper protocol and abandoning a proper bunker. Under the tactical logic of the time, refusing to move and trapping oneself in a dead end was considered irresponsible suicide. But when intelligence evaluated the damage to the supply line, everyone fell silent. Romano had single-handedly delayed an entire regiment's supplies for 48 hours, which led directly to the destruction of German tanks by Allied artillery because they had run out of fuel. The court-martial threats turned into a Medal of Honor nomination. The U.S. Sniper School even sent interviewers to see Romano. Based on his experience, they rewrote the manuals on static elevated observation posts and high-angle fire corrections. Romano broke every rule, but he created a miracle. In the most desperate of circumstances, he chose the most stubborn, resilient way to fulfill his duty. Vincent Romano eventually returned to Brooklyn. He continued to live on the rooftops there, but he never picked up a hunting rifle again. For him, those 72 hours of smoke and ice had exhausted a lifetime's worth of the will to kill. He proved to the world that a true ace isn't the one who runs the fastest, but the one who, when death arrives, refuses to move and refuses to yield, the ghost in the trees. This game of will against rules was frozen forever in that cold dawn of 1944. It serves as a reminder to future military minds. On the battlefield, there are no absolute rules, only survival and absolute loyalty to the mission.